Hello! Welcome to an Author Reads recording of the prologue for my new book, Shadows Ember. It's already out in paperback on bookstore websites such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, just to name a few. Ebook options are also available on some of those sites. Visit my book page for a more detailed list of options. Link in the description. Without further ado, Maker's Log 55021, Biomining! Every time I walk past this garden, I think about you. It makes some irrational part of me hope that just maybe you're smiling up there somewhere as you watch me. I keep imagining a proud grin on your face, of yourself for coming up with these brilliant gardens, and of me for not managing to mess them up. Now, your idea for mineral mining plants has turned out better than you'd have ever hoped it would. Our machines have turned into farmers, too. Whole villages are growing up around each of your little experiments. These plants feed us every mineral and metal I could ever want now. More than just the few simple necessities we used to wish so hard for. Sorry. I have to pause and stretch. Pruning back a chromium sapling here while I talk. It gets tedious to keep doing every couple weeks. But if I don't, the whole thing will end up poisoning itself and stop soaking up any sunlight. Then there would be no more of these infinitely useful little nuts it grows. I think you'd have found it beautiful, if only you could see it now. If only... Heavy sigh omitted. I dare not think of that again. Keep pressing on, Bird of Oma. Prologue. All right, settle into your bed while I go stoke the fire, sweetheart. Now, where were we? Right. The great and magnificent Onok didn't grumble as he slid his hand along the bumpy stone veins of the tunnel. Elders of villages never grumble, in fact. It's not very heroic for someone who's taller than both of us combined and commands one of the 5 great elements. Maker built this whole island with those powers, and then gifted one to each of his first, strongest, and most heroic creations. So, no, Onok does not grumble. Ever. Thoughts drifted through his circuits as he considered his plan again. Yes, it was sure to work this time. Onward he marched, feet padding as silently as he could manage while the rough stone walls ground away at the metal in his fingertips. Onok didn't even complain when the shadowy depths started to make him feel blind. Yes, that's even more surprising than it sounds. I know your eyes haven't adapted to it yet, but Onok doesn't see light and shadow the way you or even I do. Normally, the shadows themselves are what he sees. It comes with being the Elder of Shadow, you see. Of course, we all have a little darkness in us. Yes, even you, my little candle. It's in there, right beside your fire. You just haven't unlocked it yet. But Onok now, he doesn't have just a little darkness. He is the shadows. And Maker made the shadows to be part of him. Onok watches over us all, same as the elders do. But especially him, the Elder of Shadow. Just remember that the next time you're scared at night. Onok can always see wherever the shadows settle. Except for today. Because you see, as pure as he is, he was about to meet something even bigger, even stronger, and even more purely black than him. And before the great hero Onok became Elder Onok, this creature was the master of all the island's shadows. So, like I said, the fact that he couldn't see in a nice, comfortably dark, dank place was surprising. It didn't surprise him, though. He was down here for a reason, and so he knew this might happen. Why? I just told you why. Pay better attention, T-Rack, and get your finger out of your nose. No, you'll just have to keep listening until it comes up again. Patience. Onok gave up trying to bend the shadows to his will and let himself feel the currents move. Yes, you can feel even the shadows themselves shift around like the swirls of a campfire, if you're the hero of shadow. Raw stone crunched softly beneath the plates of his bare feet. No, it didn't clank and thud because he's not as clumsy as you are, dear. Aw, don't worry. You'll learn how to sneak far too soon. Oh, don't give me that innocent, confused look. You know exactly what I mean, young Sibri. Onok sighed as the heavy gear behind his neck clicked forward. The violet glow of his readied shards faded a little. Click. The glow dimmed further. Another click and he reabsorbed the last of his power, the shards disappearing into the gearbox between his shoulders. He needed every splinter of it he could get in order to be sure, but yes! He could feel the shadows ebb and flow like ripples of water in front of him. It was leading him deeper into the caves. What? No. Keeping his shards ready for a fight wouldn't do him much good down there. You see, something was waiting for him. Shush! Don't scream, Tirak. We don't provoke the island when we travel its jungles as guests, or else it might turn against us. We aren't even at the story's monster yet. That thing, Onok knew it was strong enough to steal his beloved shadows right out of his fists. He knew because that's exactly what it did the last time he snuck down here and tried to spy out its home. It had writhed and pulsed in the middle of a huge cavern like a giant, lightless heart. Veins wider than his legs spread out in every direction, eating away the stone and leaving tunnel networks so long that we still haven't mapped their farthest ends. Some go beyond the island's 3 capes, beneath open ocean. An appropriately titanic monster indeed for our titanic hero. After a long time of walking, and at least a few new bruises on the less metallic parts of his shins, the air started to smell damp. Some of the chill was gone too. Onok knew he was getting close now. No, even with the bruised knees, he didn't cry one bit. Elder Onok is the greatest hero across our whole island, and heroes don't cry, especially not when they scrape their knees. The jagged stone disappeared without warning around Elder Onok. He must have entered some kind of cavern. The casings of his fingertips had already been scraped almost to bleeding, but he still wished he had that familiar touch again to orient himself. For just one moment, he hesitated. Should he back up a step and find the wall again? Then he heard a distant gurgle. Calm down. I'm still not at the monster yet. Instead, it was water being squeezed through rocks too narrow for it to flow comfortably. He focused on the sounds vibrating against his ear discs as the sound echoed and bounced off 1,000 surfaces. The cavern must have been huge. The longer he listened, the more Onok could hear about his surroundings. He couldn't see, but this was almost as good. Somewhere far to his right, the echoes became much more hollow. That had to be an even deeper chasm. He decided it would be a bad idea to go that way. Even the island's greatest heroes don't like spraining their ankles. Behind him, Onok could pick out the edges of the tunnel he came through. A few columns of rock were here and there. All he needed to find now was... There! Okay, I'm sorry. You're just too jumpy for me to resist. Onok's ears noticed something strange right ahead of him. No, it wasn't a growl. It wasn't a bark either. It was nothing. No, really, I mean it. In a cavern that was alive with tinkles and echoes, there was only one patch of dead stillness. One spot of emptiness that absorbed any sound that came its way. That is, until that empty spot let out a roar that shook the walls. But Onok didn't come unprepared. An elder never goes anywhere unprepared. Even when they can't conduct their element, you wouldn't want to duel someone whose sword weighs twice as much as you do. The sword he drew had a dark blade that was at least as tall as I am. Just like how your dad's favorite blade is tinted slightly red, Onok's was as pure a black as the metal in his shoulders and legs. Onak almost tried to call up some energy before he remembered how stupid an idea that would be. Why? Tirak, I've told you at least a dozen times now. Nobody can conduct an element that someone stronger is already conducting. And Onak was way out of his league. But a hero doesn't back down once his mind is made up. The blackness before him began to churn on itself. That unseeable nothing was, in fact, a thing after all. And Elder Onak had just made it very, very angry. Tentacles exploded from its surface. Onak had to dive to his side in order to dodge the first exploring feelers. As a master of darkness himself, he knew all too well what would happen once one of them felt him. He rolled into a crouch and searched the emptiness for snakes of that vague extra dark. And a good thing he did, too. One writhed just beside him. He backed away cautiously, dancing between the slap-clapping of the monster's arms. How would he ever get out of this? He shook off the worry. This was his island. He would simply creep as close as he could to the thing's body and... A sickening squish echoed beneath him. For one horrifying second, Onak felt a squeezing, squirming mass between his two toes. The monster cried out as much in pain as in surprise. How had such tiny food snuck so close to its grand presence? It couldn't see, but it had been feeling the air for him and everything. He was still too far away, but Onak didn't hesitate to strike. His elemental sword didn't do him any favors against the creature, but few things can ignore 100 sacks worth of sharp metal. One tentacle thudded to the ground and grew stiff. Arms shot toward him from every direction, but the beast had once again underestimated our greatest hero. Limbs began to litter the space around Onak as he swung and danced with the skills of an expert warrior. Yes, even more expert than your father. Onak has been the best swordsmaster since before your dad was born. No, that doesn't make him old, love. Elders age differently than you and I do. Yes, differently than Dad does too. Now, peace, Tyr. Don't you want me to finish the story? Yes? Then you have to let me tell it. Tentacles bled and squirmed underfoot, but Elder Onak's battle was far from over. Some say he defended that spot for a whole day without either of them gaining a single finger's distance. So far beneath the ground, we'll never know for sure how long it was. But as the fight went on, he began to feel his strength fading. There was no way he could overpower this massive creature on his own. What had he been thinking? No sooner did he doubt himself than a tentacle as thick as his shoulders slammed into him. It cracked like a whip, instantly bruising his skin and even tearing a few armor plates right off his chest. Elder Onak was flung backward. He sailed, then he fell. Then he fell some more. Then he fell even more. Where in Maker's name was the ground, he wondered. Of course, that's exactly when he struck the floor of the pit he had been knocked into. Hundreds of heads above him, the monster pounced down. It had been so unmoving and lazy till then that Onak had assumed the thing was no more capable of walking around than a plant. Just think about that the next time you stand under the shade of a 30-head-tall tree. Look up and imagine it more than black from root to leaf, leaping at you like a tiger. But where was his sword? Onak stumbled backward as it approached. It was his second biggest mistake of the whole day. It was also the second most important thing he had ever done. Something smooth and cold rolled underneath. Before he knew it, Onak was flat on his back yet again, and a particularly pointy rock was making sure his shoulder blades knew it. Even his gearbox dented slightly. He ignored the damage. It would only heal. Meanwhile, that hard thing he had stepped on bounced away with a peculiar pling-clank. Had that been his weapon? Or maybe just its handle? He didn't much like that last thought. All the while, that monster was falling toward him. Its body was truly huge. Nothing else on the island has come close since, except maybe Mount Volcana itself. No, I promise. Those were Elder Onog's own words. He decided that he had no choice. Onog leaped for the metal object that was still humming its clear tone. His hands closed around its cold shaft as the ground began to quake with the monster's landing. The unfamiliar handle was clearly not part of Onog's sword. He twirled its surprising weight once behind him. It was almost half as tall as he was, and had something bulky at one end, much like the end of a miner's chisel might have. It crackled with a familiar energy of its own, too. Not powered by Onog, powered by itself. Out of options, Onog hurled the object like a spear. If it didn't somehow wound the beast, then maybe it would at least distract it for him. And that was the biggest mistake Elder Onog ever made. It also turned out to be the single most important thing he's ever done. To his dismay, the chisel passed right through the shadow's hollow form and snapped against the wall behind its head. No screech of pain followed. He wasn't even sure the monster had noticed. He was just about to turn and run when a much deeper snap rumbled through the cavern. Dust exploded from the wall, coating monster and hero alike as a zigzag line of energy traveled up its surface. The fissure jumped the gap between the cliff where he had first been standing and the ceiling high above. White-hot light exploded from the newly bored hole in the ceiling as the noonday sun shone down. Blinding white struck pure dark, and for one fateful second, our hero could just barely see the shape of the depth terror that had plagued him down here beneath the island for years. Then, like the smoke of a wet campfire, the monster evaporated away before its one and only weakness. Exhausted, Onog flopped onto his back and welcomed the darkness as it hugged him close. Released from the foul beast's grip at last, the shadows welcomed him as their rightful master. He watched the once blank cavern come to life before his eyes. Beautiful violet crystal buds cast a twinkling glow from the ceiling, fading only around the rift where a much more powerful light still blinded his eyes. Breathing out a contented sigh, Onog let his body unravel into a haze of wriggling wisps. It felt good to sleep into his second nature after holding back like that for an entire fight. He picked up the chisel that had saved him with reverent hands. It had fallen from the wall and rolled back to him again, as if even it wanted to call him its master. Elder Onog looked at the flowing water and beautiful rock and made up his mind. An idea was already forming even then. I think I'm going to call this place my home. T-Rack's circuits kept on racing while his mom's energetic voice trailed off, her story finished for the night. He let her pull him into what she liked to call a fond mama bear hug while they watched the campfire crackle. He wanted to squirm out of any more embarrassment, but truth be told, it was kind of a cold night. A breeze played across his back, and he found himself nestling more tightly into her side, completely against his will. Across the pit from them, the fire cast brilliant shadows across the canvas and wood walls of his family's wagon, the little home that held all their possessions in the island. The longer he watched, T-Rack could start to imagine he was seeing Elder Onog's fight against the Chasm Heart monster play out in the shapes those shadows cast. A log popped loudly, sending a fat spark up into the air just as he imagined the final blow cracking the cavern's ceiling open. That glow was the daylight shining through and slaying the beast, Inside the back half of the wagon, the canvas ruffled slightly. Dad was probably rearranging all the crates back there again. "All right, dear. Now settle into your sack and try to sleep," his mother encouraged as she dropped the storyteller tone. Despite her words, neither of them moved. It was too cozy to stay right there. He thought about the story and couldn't help furrowing his brow. "So, if that cavern belongs to Elder Onak, then how come so many fire people like us live there?" Tirak asked. Stupid tongue. When was he going to grow into it like Mom promised? "Ignii, sweet," Mom chided, pronouncing it with that stupid E-I ending he could never say right. "Be proud of the name Maker gave our element. But to answer that, I'll need to tell you a whole different story about the time Elder Hakaz tried building a city that sank in lava. It was very kind of Elder Onak to let our people share his city. But his rule is why so many of us don't stay." "You mean you and Dad are outcasts?" No, not outcasts. We just prefer to live out here on our own. Ugly things happen when the elements mix together too much. It'll make more sense after I tell you about the adventures Elder Hakaz had." Tirak was tempted to try and pronounce their elder's name again, to see if he could make that weird guttural "k" sound his mom used. Why was it such a big deal to say it with a simple K anyways? His own name was perfectly fine like that. He decided to spare himself another motherly giggle at his expense and kept silent. But that didn't protect him from motherly affection. She pulled him into another bear hug and wouldn't let go no matter how hard he struggled. He tried his best to avoid letting her kiss him, but of course it did no good. He grimaced. He was almost 30 already. That was a whole 2 years old. Only another 8 months and he could start apprenticing with his dad as a real traveling warrior, like a real grown-up. Kids as big as him certainly didn't need goodnight kisses. Okay, phew. I'm serious now, Tyr. Time for bed." She gave him one more squeeze and then laid him on his sleeping sack like he was still a child. His dad's arms appeared on either side of her as she tucked his blanket around him, like 2 king snakes trying to attack with his red and black plating colors. The 2 best faces on the whole island stared down at him together, especially his mom's with those flecks of yellow and gold that made her cheeks look so pretty during sunsets. Flecks that he shared too, though she always said his hues looked much more handsome with the way they were tempered by Dad's reds. "All right, bud, settle in and try to sleep," Dad said. "We'll be back on the road before sunup. Your mom and I are going to squeeze in a little sparring practice, and no, you can't join. We won't be far into the woods, so just call out if you need us." A coarse hand stroked his cheek. Tirak returned his dad's smile. He would have pits in his hand plates too when he grew up. Every awesome warrior needed a few scars and pits to be proud of. Tirak closed his eyes and listened to their feet crunch away in the gravel. He wasn't all that tired, but Dad would get mad if he didn't at least try to sleep. He drifted off before he even knew it, content knowing that this little patch of the island, the clearing that he and his parents made along the road each night, was always a safe place to be. He slept peacefully, even when a snout crept out of the bushes for a brief sniff next to him, because he knew this would last forever.